The trading post on Kepler 442b buzzed with the usual mix of species conducting business across the Outer Rim territories. Zephyrian merchants haggled over crystal shipments, while Thackeray engineers examined fusion components with their four-eye precision. The air recyclers worked overtime to accommodate the various atmosphere preferences, creating a symphony of hisses and hums that seasoned traders had learned to ignore. Captain Sarah Chun adjusted the leash attached to her companion, a golden retriever named Buster who wagged his tail at every new scent and sound. The dog had been her constant companion for 3 years of deep space trading runs, ever since she'd rescued him from a derelict Earth transport. Most aliens found the relationship puzzling at best, incomprehensible at worst. "Why do humans insist on traveling with non-sentient creatures?" asked Vextar, a towering hegemony official whose chitinous plates gleamed under the station's artificial lighting. His mandibles clicked with obvious distaste as Buster sniffed curiously at his metallic boots. Such inefficiency. Sarah's jaw tightened, but she kept her voice level. Buster's not cargo, he's family. And he's smarter than half the beings on this station. The hegemony had been expanding their territory aggressively over the past decade, absorbing smaller civilizations under the banner of galactic efficiency. Their philosophy emphasized cold logic and resource optimization above all else. Emotional attachments were viewed as weakness, particularly among species they deemed primitive. Vextar's compound eyes fixed on the dog with scientific curiosity. Fascinating how lesser species form such irrational bonds. The Hegemony Council would find this specimen useful for behavioral studies. "He's not a specimen," Sarah said firmly, her hand instinctively moving to rest on Buster's head. The dog looked up at her with trusting brown eyes, tail still wagging despite the tension in the air. The alien official made a note on his digital tablet, stylus clicking against the surface with mechanical precision. "All cargo must be declared for taxation purposes, including biological entities. Buster isn't cargo either. He's a registered crew member with full documentation." This wasn't entirely true, but Sarah had learned to navigate bureaucratic loopholes during her years as an independent trader. Most civilizations had some provision for essential personnel, even if they didn't understand the human concept of pets. Vextar's mandibles spread in what might have been amusement. Crew member? This creature contributes nothing to ship operations. It consumes resources without providing value. Before Sarah could respond, Buster's ears perked up, and he began whining softly. His sensitive nose had detected something the station's sensors had missed. Within seconds, emergency alarms began blaring throughout the facility. "Hull breach in Section 7, came the announcement over the comm system. "All personnel evacuate immediately." The trading floor erupted into controlled chaos as various species hurried toward emergency exits. Sarah scooped up Buster and headed for her ship, but Vextar blocked her path. "The creature detected the breach before our instruments," he observed, his tone shifting to something resembling scientific fascination. "Remarkable sensory capabilities for such a primitive organism." "That's what good dogs do," Sarah replied, pushing past him. "They watch out for their pack." As she made her way through the crowd, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that Vextar's interest in Buster had taken a dangerous turn. The Hegemony collected useful species for their archives, studying and cataloging them before deciding their ultimate fate. She'd heard rumors of entire civilizations being relocated for research purposes that lasted generations. Her ship, the Lucky Strike, sat in Docking Bay 12, its familiar bulk providing a sense of security in the chaos. Sarah ran through her pre-flight checklist with practiced efficiency while Buster settled into his custom safety harness. The dog had learned to enjoy the sensation of acceleration, often pressing his nose against the viewport to watch stars stretch into lines during jump preparation. As the Lucky Strike cleared the station's gravitational field, Sarah received an encrypted message on her personal comm. The sender was listed as unknown, but the content made her blood run cold. "Captain Chun, Your biological companion has caught the attention of certain parties within the hegemony hierarchy. We strongly advise caution in your future dealings. A concerned friend. Sarah deleted the message and pulled Buster closer, scratching behind his ears as she contemplated their options. The dog leaned against her leg, offering wordless comfort with the intuitive understanding that had made their bond so strong. "Looks like we're in for some trouble, buddy," she murmured. Buster responded with a soft woof, his tail thumping against the deck plating. In his simple canine worldview, as long as Sarah was with him, everything would be all right. He had no way of knowing that powerful forces were already planning to test the strength of that bond. The ship's navigation computer chimed, indicating they'd reached the jump point for their next destination. Sarah hesitated over the controls, knowing that each hyperspace jump left a traceable signature. The hegemony had resources she could barely imagine, and if they truly wanted Buster for their research programs, running would only delay the inevitable confrontation. But she'd made a promise to protect him, just as he'd protected her countless times with his loyalty and instinctive warnings. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. The stars outside the viewport shimmered as the Lucky Strike prepared to jump, carrying its two-member crew toward an uncertain future where the galaxy was about to learn that some bonds couldn't be broken by force or logic. 3 weeks after the incident at the trading post, Sarah found herself docked at Haven Station, a neutral port known for its relaxed regulations and diverse clientele. The massive structure orbited a gas giant whose swirling storms provided a hypnotic backdrop for the constant flow of ships arriving and departing. Buster had been restless during their recent jumps, his canine instincts picking up on Sarah's growing anxiety. She'd been checking over her shoulder constantly, half expecting hegemony cruisers to drop out of hyperspace at any moment. The anonymous warning had proven prophetic as subtle inquiries about her whereabouts began reaching her through various channels. The dog trotted alongside her through Haven's main promenade, drawing the usual mixture of curious glances and bemused comments from alien species who couldn't fathom the human-canine relationship. Children of various species pointed excitedly at Buster's wagging tail, though their parents often pulled them away with disapproving clicks or chirps. "Sarah Chun." The familiar voice made her turn to see Commander Marcus Webb, approaching with 2 other humans in Earth Defense Force uniforms. Marcus had served alongside her father years ago, before the old man had decided civilian trading offered better prospects than military service. "Marcus," she acknowledged cautiously. "Been a while." "Too long," he agreed, though his expression remained serious. "We need to talk. Privately." They made their way to a small cafe tucked away in one of Haven's quieter sections, where the ambient noise of multiple conversations provided perfect cover for sensitive discussions. Buster settled at Sarah's feet, accepting scratches from the other humans while keeping his ears alert for potential threats. "The hegemony has been asking questions," Marcus began without preamble. "Specifically about you and your companion here." "What kind of questions?" "The kind that suggests they're planning something unpleasant," replied Lieutenant Torres, one of Marcus's companions. "Our intelligence indicates they've classified your dog as a strategic biological asset, worth acquiring for their research programs." Sarah felt her stomach tighten. "Buster's just a dog. What could they possibly want with him?" "More than you might think," said the third officer, introducing herself as Dr. Amanda Foster. "I've been studying hegemony research protocols. They're particularly interested in species that demonstrate unusual behavioral patterns or sensory capabilities. Your companion's ability to detect that hull breach before their sensors registered it would definitely qualify." Buster's tail wagged at the attention, blissfully unaware that he'd become the subject of galactic politics. Sarah scratched behind his ears, finding comfort in the simple gesture. "They can't just take him," she said firmly. "There are laws even out here." Marcus exchanged glances with his companions. The hegemony has been finding creative ways around inconvenient regulations lately. They've already approached the local authorities about initiating a biological contamination investigation that would require quarantining any Earth-origin life forms pending extensive study. That's ridiculous. Buster's been cleared by medical scanners on dozens of stations. Since when has the hegemony let facts interfere with their agenda? Torres asked rhetorically. They want your dog, and they'll manufacture whatever justification necessary to get him. Dr. Foster leaned forward, her expression intense. There's something else you should know. Intelligence suggests the hegemony isn't just interested in individual specimens anymore. They're developing a comprehensive catalog of what they call enhancement opportunities across known space. Species with useful traits are being systematically collected and studied. You're talking about slavery, Sarah said bluntly. We're talking about the hegemony's version of scientific advancement, Marcus corrected grimly. They don't see other species as equals, just resources to be optimized and exploited. Buster suddenly raised his head, ears pricked forward as he stared toward the cafe's entrance. Sarah followed his gaze and felt her blood chill. 3 hegemony officials in their distinctive metallic uniforms had entered the establishment, their compound eyes scanning the crowd with mechanical precision. Time to go, Marcus whispered urgently. They rose casually from their table, but the hegemony officials had already spotted them. The lead figure, taller than the others with more elaborate armor plating, pointed directly at their group. Captain Shun, the alien called out in heavily accented standard. We require discussion regarding biological contamination protocols. Sarah scooped up Buster's leash and headed for the cafe's rear exit, but found their path blocked by 2 more hegemony soldiers. The aliens moved with surprising speed for their size, their multiple limbs giving them an advantage in confined spaces. Your companion requires immediate quarantine, continued the lead official, producing an official-looking document. Hegemony Health Authority has jurisdiction over all biological threats to station security. Buster isn't a threat to anyone, Sarah replied, backing against the wall with her dog pressed protectively against her legs. Determination of threat level requires comprehensive analysis, the alien insisted, extending a restraining device toward Buster. Cooperation ensures minimal discomfort during transportation. That was when Buster did something he'd never done before in all their travels together. The normally friendly golden retriever bared his teeth and growled low in his throat, a sound that seemed to resonate with something primal and dangerous. His hackles rose as he positioned himself between Sarah and the approaching aliens. The hegemony officials hesitated, clearly unprepared for aggressive resistance for what they'd categorized as a docile specimen. In that moment of uncertainty, Marcus and his team moved into action. Earth Defense Force, Marcus announced loudly, displaying his credentials while Torres and Dr. Foster flanked the hegemony soldiers. This human and her companion are under EDF protection during an ongoing investigation. Hegemony Authority supersedes Earth jurisdiction, the lead official replied, but his tone had become less certain. Not on a neutral station, Torres countered. Haven's neutrality charter specifically prohibits arbitrary detention without proper evidence of wrongdoing. The standoff stretched for several tense seconds while other cafe patrons began backing away from the confrontation. Buster continued his low growling, every instinct telling him these strangers represented a threat to his beloved human. Finally, the hegemony leader retracted his restraining device. Investigation continues. Cooperation will be required eventually. As the aliens withdrew, Sarah realized this was only the beginning. The hegemony had made their intentions clear, and neither Haven's neutrality nor Earth's protection would deter them indefinitely. They wanted Buster, and they were prepared to use whatever means necessary to get him. We need to get you somewhere safe, Marcus said quietly as the cafe returned to normal. Sarah looked down at Buster, whose tail had resumed its usual wagging now that the immediate threat had passed. The dog trusted her to protect him, just as she trusted him to warn her of danger. But for the first time since they'd become companions, she wondered if her protection would be enough against forces that viewed love and loyalty as weaknesses to be exploited. The galaxy was about to learn that they'd seriously underestimated the strength of the human-canine bond. The EDF safe house on Proxima Colony looked ordinary enough on the outside, just another prefabricated structure among the settlement's utilitarian buildings. Inside, however, advanced security systems hummed quietly, while encrypted communications equipment maintained constant contact with Earth Defense Force headquarters. Sarah sat cross-legged on the floor, absently throwing a synthetic ball for Buster, while Marcus briefed her on the deteriorating situation. The dog bounded after his toy with undiminished enthusiasm, completely unaware that his freedom depended on decisions being made in boardrooms across the galaxy. The hegemony filed formal complaints with 12 different regulatory bodies. Marcus explained, consulting his tablet. They're claiming Buster represents an uncontrolled biological variable that could disrupt their carefully maintained ecosystem protocols. That's complete nonsense, Dr. Foster interjected from her workstation. I've analyzed every health scan Buster's undergone in the past year. He's probably cleaner than most space station personnel. Since when do facts matter to bureaucrats? Sarah asked bitterly. They want him for their research programs, and they'll manufacture whatever excuse sounds plausible. Torres looked up from the communications array where he'd been monitoring hegemony fleet movements. It's worse than bureaucratic manipulation. Intelligence indicates they're planning something called Operation Archive, systematic collection and cataloging of what they consider genetically valuable species from across known space. Buster returned with his ball, dropping it hopefully at Sarah's feet before settling against her leg. She scratched behind his ears while processing the implications of what Torres had revealed. How many species are we talking about? She asked. Preliminary reports suggest they've identified over 300 potential targets. Dr. Foster replied grimly. Everything from Centauri memory cats to vegan empathy worms. If it has unusual abilities or characteristics, the hegemony wants it. And dogs made the list because loyalty, Marcus said simply. The hegemony has identified canine devotion to humans as a potentially exploitable trait. They want to understand how to replicate that kind of absolute dedication in other species. Sarah felt sick. The idea of reducing Buster's love to a collection of genetic markers and behavioral algorithms seemed like the ultimate violation of everything that made their bond special. Dogs didn't love humans because they were programmed to. They chose to love, and that choice made all the difference. There's more, Torres continued reluctantly. The hegemony has been approaching other civilizations with an offer. Share information about valuable species in your territory and receive preferential trade agreements in return. Several governments have already signed preliminary accords. Including Earth? Sarah asked, dreading the answer. Marcus shook his head. Earth's refusing to cooperate, which is why the hegemony is trying other approaches. They can't simply invade human space without triggering a major war, so they're attempting to acquire specimens through legal channels. Or illegal ones, Dr. Foster added darkly. As if summoned by their conversation, the safe house's proximity alarms began chiming softly. Torres quickly accessed the external sensor feeds, his expression growing tense as he studied the displays. Hegemony patrol ships, he announced. 3 vessels in standard search formation, heading directly for the colony. Marcus activated the emergency protocols, shutting down non-essential systems while bringing defensive measures online. The safe house had been designed to withstand casual inspection, but a determined search would eventually uncover its true purpose. How long do we have? Sarah asked, gathering Buster's supplies. Maybe an hour before they begin detailed scans of the settlement, Torres estimated. After that, all bets are off. Dr. Foster was already packing her research equipment while Marcus coordinated with the colony administrator through encrypted channels. Proxima Colony maintained official neutrality, but its human population made discretion a practical necessity when dealing with hegemony demands. There's an old mining facility about 50 kilometers north, Marcus explained as they prepared to evacuate. Abandoned for years, but the tunnel should provide adequate shielding from sensor scans. They loaded their equipment into a ground vehicle designed for the colony's rough terrain, with Buster secured in a special harness that would keep him safe during the journey. The dog seemed to sense the urgency of their situation, remaining alert but calm as they departed the safe house. The landscape outside Proxima Colony was harsh, but beautiful, with crystalline formations jutting up from the red soil like alien sculptures. Buster pressed his nose against the vehicle's window, watching the strange terrain roll past with the curious enthusiasm he brought to every new experience. "He has no idea what's happening," Sarah observed quietly. "Maybe that's for the best," Dr. Foster replied. Fear wouldn't help him right now. The abandoned mining facility proved to be larger than expected, with multiple levels carved deep into the planet's substrate. Marcus led them to a section that had been converted into an emergency shelter, complete with life support systems and communication equipment. As they settled into their temporary refuge, Sarah couldn't help but wonder how long they could keep running. The hegemony had vast resources and seemingly unlimited patience. Sooner or later, they would have to make a stand. Buster explored their new surroundings with typical canine curiosity, his tail wagging as he investigated interesting smells and sounds. When he found a comfortable spot near Sarah's makeshift bed, he settled down with a contented sigh. "He trusts you completely," Dr. Foster observed. "Even in a situation like this, he's not afraid because you're with him." "That's what dogs do," Sarah replied, stroking Buster's golden fur. "They believe in their humans absolutely, even when we don't deserve it." Marcus joined them after completing his security checks. The Hegemony Patrol is conducting a systematic search of the colony. They'll probably expand their grid to include this area within the next few days. "So what's our next move?" "Earth Defense Command is putting together a response," he explained. "But it's going to take time to organize something effective. In the meantime, we need to keep you and Buster out of Hegemony hands." Torres appeared in the doorway, his expression grim. "We just intercepted a Hegemony transmission. They're not just after Buster anymore. Operation Archive has been accelerated. They're planning to begin mass collections within the next month." The implications hit everyone simultaneously. Hundreds of species across the galaxy were about to find themselves targeted for research by the Hegemony's scientific apparatus. The same cold logic that viewed Buster as a biological specimen would soon be applied to countless other creatures whose only crime was possessing traits the Hegemony found useful. "We can't let that happen," Sarah said firmly. "One ship against the Hegemony fleet?" Marcus asked skeptically. "One human and her dog," Sarah corrected, looking down at Buster's trusting face. "They want to understand loyalty? Let's show them what it really looks like." Outside the mining facility, the first of Proxima's 3 moons was rising, casting pale light across the alien landscape. Somewhere in the darkness, Hegemony forces were hunting for a single golden retriever whose capacity for love had inadvertently triggered a confrontation that would reshape the galaxy's understanding of the bonds between species. The galaxy was about to learn that some things were worth fighting for. No matter the odds, news of Operation Archive spread through the galaxy faster than the Hegemony had anticipated. Within days of the initial intelligence leak, dozens of species found themselves facing the terrifying prospect of having their most cherished companions cataloged and collected for scientific research. The Centauri were the first to respond with outrage. Their memory cats, small feline creatures capable of storing and sharing emotional imprints, were considered sacred by their civilization. The idea of subjecting these beloved companions to Hegemony experimentation triggered protests across every Centauri world. On Vega Prime, crowds gathered around government buildings demanding protection for their empathy worms, symbiotic creatures that helped vegans process emotional trauma. The Hegemony's classification of these beings as useful biological tools had struck at the heart of vegan culture. Similar scenes played out across known space, as species after species discovered their most treasured relationships had been reduced to entries in a Hegemony catalog. The cold logic that had seemed so reasonable in academic papers became monstrous when applied to living beings who were family members, not specimens. Sarah watched these developments unfold from the Mining Facilities Communication Center, where Dr. Foster had established links to news networks across the galaxy. Buster lay at her feet, occasionally lifting his head when particularly agitated voices emerged from the speakers. "They're calling it the Companion Crisis," Torres reported, monitoring diplomatic channels. 7 major civilizations have filed formal protests with the Galactic Council. 3 others are threatening to suspend trade relations with the hegemony entirely. The hegemony's response? Marcus asked. Predictable, Torres replied grimly. They're claiming their research will benefit all species by improving interspecies cooperation and understanding. They've even offered to share their findings with contributing civilizations. Dr. Foster looked up from her analysis station where she'd been studying intercepted hegemony communications. There's something else. The hegemony leadership seems genuinely confused by the negative reaction. Their internal communications suggest they didn't anticipate this level of resistance to what they consider a logical scientific endeavor. They don't understand, Sarah realized. They literally cannot comprehend why we'd choose emotional bonds over practical benefits. That might be their greatest weakness, Marcus mused, and our greatest advantage. A priority signal from Earth Defense Command interrupted their discussion. Admiral Rivera's weathered face appeared on the main display, her expression grave but determined. Captain Chun, the situation has escalated beyond our initial projections. The hegemony has begun preliminary collection operations in 3 systems. We need to act now, before Operation Archive reaches full implementation. What do you need from us? Sarah asked. Your dog, Rivera said bluntly. Not for the hegemony, but as a symbol. Every species facing collection has rallied around the idea of protecting their companions. Buster has become the face of resistance to hegemony oppression. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. You want to use him as propaganda? I want to give him a choice to help save others like himself, Rivera corrected. Earth Defense Command is organizing a joint operation with affected civilizations. We call it the Companion Protocol. The goal is to demonstrate that the bonds between species are stronger than hegemony force. Dr. Foster accessed the operation details on her tablet, her eyes widening as she read. They want to stage a public demonstration, bring representatives from every affected species to a central location, and show the galaxy what the hegemony is trying to destroy. Where? Marcus asked. Neutral Station Alpha, Rivera replied. The Galactic Council's primary diplomatic facility. Maximum visibility, maximum impact. If we can prove that companion bonds represent genuine partnerships rather than primitive emotional responses, we might be able to turn galactic opinion against the hegemony. Torres frowned at his tactical display. That station will be crawling with hegemony security. They'll never allow such a demonstration to proceed. That's where you're wrong, Rivera said with a slight smile. The hegemony has agreed to participate. They're so confident in their scientific position that they want to publicly debate the issue. They believe they can logically demonstrate the superiority of their approach. Sarah looked down at Buster, who was sleeping peacefully despite the chaos swirling around him. The dog trusted her to make the right decisions, just as she trusted him to warn her of danger. Now that trust was about to be tested on a galactic stage. What would Buster have to do? Simply be himself, Rivera explained. Show the galaxy what genuine partnership looks like. But, Sarah, you need to understand the risks. If this goes wrong, the hegemony will have legal justification to seize him under their scientific research protocols. And if it goes right, we establish a new precedent. Companion species gain protected status under galactic law. The hegemony's collection program becomes legally impossible to implement. Marcus stepped forward. Admiral, the tactical situation is problematic. Neutral Station Alpha is deep in hegemony space. If their fleet decides to ignore legal niceties, we'll be sitting ducks. Earth Defense Command will provide escort, Rivera assured him, along with elements from the Centauri fleet and Vegan Defense Corps. The hegemony may be confident, but they're not suicidal. They won't risk a multi-species war over one debate. Dr. Foster had been analyzing probability matrices while they spoke. The mathematical models are encouraging. Public opinion is already shifting against the hegemony. A successful demonstration could trigger a cascade effect that makes Operation Archive politically impossible. And if we lose, then every species in the galaxy learns to hide their most precious companions, Rivera said grimly. The age of open interspecies friendship ends, replaced by suspicion and fear. Sarah made her decision with the same instinctive certainty that had guided her through 3 years of deep space trading. Buster had protected her from countless dangers with his simple, unwavering loyalty. Now it was time to return that protection, not just for him, but for every companion across the galaxy. "We'll do it," she announced, scratching behind Buster's ears as he woke from his nap. "But I have one condition." "Name it," Rivera replied. "Buster and I face this together. No separation, no matter what the hegemony demands. We're a team, and teams don't abandon each other." The dog stretched and yawned, then looked up at Sarah with the complete trust that had started this whole crisis. His tail wagged once, a simple gesture that somehow contained more genuine emotion than all the hegemony's scientific analysis combined. "Understood, Captain," Rivera said. "Prepare for departure. The galaxy is about to witness something the hegemony has never encountered before. The power of love willing to fight for itself." As the communication ended, Sarah realized they were no longer running from the hegemony. They were running toward a confrontation that would determine the future of companion relationships across known space. The stakes couldn't be higher, but she'd never felt more certain of her choice. Buster sensed her renewed confidence and responded with an enthusiastic bark, ready to follow his human wherever the journey might lead. Together, they would teach the galaxy that some bonds were stronger than logic, more valuable than efficiency, and worth defending against any force that tried to reduce them to mere data points. The final lesson was about to begin. Neutral Station Alpha had never hosted a gathering quite like this one. The massive diplomatic facility, normally reserved for trade negotiations and territorial disputes, hummed with unprecedented activity as representatives from dozens of species arrived with their cherished companions. Sarah stood in the main assembly chamber, watching in amazement as the galaxy's most diverse collection of interspecies partnerships filled the vast space. A Centauri delegate cradled her memory cat, whose silvery fur shimmered with stored emotional imprints. Nearby, a vegan representative communed silently with the empathy worm coiled around his arm, their symbiotic connection visible as subtle color changes in both beings. Buster sat calmly beside Sarah, his presence somehow anchoring the chaotic energy of the gathering. Despite the overwhelming sensory input from dozens of alien species, he remained focused on his human companion with the steady devotion that had started this entire movement. "The hegemony delegation has arrived," Marcus reported through his comm unit. "They're setting up their presentation equipment in the main auditorium." Dr. Foster approached with her latest analysis of the gathering's composition. 47 species represented, each with their most significant companion relationships. The hegemony's research protocols would have affected over 2 billion sentient beings if Operation Archive had proceeded. "Any second thoughts?" Torres asked Sarah quietly. She looked down at Buster, whose tail wagged encouragingly. "None. Whatever happens here, at least we're making a choice instead of just running." The auditorium doors opened, and the assembled delegates began filing in for the historic debate. The hegemony had insisted on a formal academic presentation, confident that logic and scientific rigor would triumph over what they considered primitive emotional responses. Chief Science Administrator Kethvar took the stage first, his towering form commanding immediate attention. Multiple screens displayed complex charts and genetic analyses as he began his presentation. "Honored delegates," he began, his translated voice carrying the cold precision that characterized all hegemony communications. The research protocols of Operation Archive represent an unprecedented opportunity for galactic advancement. Through systematic study of interspecies bonding mechanisms, we can optimize cooperation and eliminate the inefficiencies caused by irrational emotional attachments. The audience stirred restlessly as Kethvar continued, reducing their most treasured relationships to biological imperatives and genetic programming. Graphs showed how companion bonding could be artificially enhanced through targeted modifications, while other charts demonstrated the resource allocation improvements possible when emotional decisions were replaced with logical optimization. The human specimen designated Buster, Kethvar said, bringing up an image of the golden retriever, represents a particularly interesting case study. Canine loyalty programming appears to function through a combination of oxytocin response patterns and hierarchical pack behavior. By replicating these mechanisms in other species, we can create more efficient interspecies cooperation protocols. Sarah felt her jaw clench as Buster was reduced to a collection of chemical reactions and behavioral algorithms. The hegemony scientists spoke of love as if it were a software bug to be debugged and optimized. The benefits are clear, Kethvar concluded. Improved productivity, reduced conflict, optimal resource distribution. The temporary discomfort of our research subjects will yield advances that benefit all galactic civilization. Polite applause echoed through the auditorium, though Sarah noticed it came primarily from the hegemony delegation and their allied species. The companion-bonded representatives remained conspicuously silent. Admiral Rivera took the stage next, her Earth Defense Force uniform sharply contrasting with Kethvar's ornate robes. She carried no charts or data displays, only a simple microphone and her conviction. Chief Administrator Kethvar speaks of optimization and efficiency, she began. But he fundamentally misunderstands what we're here to defend. The bonds between companions aren't accidents to be corrected or inefficiencies to be eliminated. They're choices made freely by beings who recognize something valuable in each other. Rivera gestured toward the assembled delegates. Every species represented here has discovered that connection transcends simple biological programming. Yes, there may be chemical components to love and loyalty, but reducing those feelings to mere chemistry is like calling a symphony nothing more than vibrations in the air. She paused, allowing her words to resonate through the chamber. The hegemony promises us optimization, but what they're really offering is the death of choice. When love becomes programmable, it ceases to be love. When loyalty is manufactured, it loses all meaning. A Centauri delegate stood up, her memory cat purring softly in her arms. The hegemony speaks of efficiency, but they cannot quantify the comfort my companion provides during times of grief. Her stored emotional imprints help our entire community heal from trauma. No amount of optimization can replace that healing. The vegan representative added his voice to the growing chorus of opposition. Our empathy worms chose to bond with us, just as we chose to accept them. That mutual decision created a partnership that has lasted for millennia. The hegemony would reduce that choice to a series of genetic modifications. One by one, delegates stood to speak about their companions. Each story revealed the same truth that Sarah had discovered with Buster. Genuine bonds could not be replicated or optimized because they emerge from the mysterious alchemy of choice, trust, and time. Kethvar attempted to respond with additional data, but the emotional testimony was overwhelming his logical arguments. The hegemony had prepared to debate science, not to confront the lived experiences of billions of bonded beings. Finally, Sarah was called to the stage. Buster walked beside her, his calm presence somehow steadying the entire auditorium. As they reached the podium, she looked out at the sea of faces, both alien and familiar, all united by their love for the companions at their sides. The hegemony wants to study Buster to understand loyalty, she began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. But they're asking the wrong question. Loyalty isn't something you can map in a laboratory or replicate through genetic modification. It's something you earn through countless small moments of trust and care. She knelt down beside Buster, who immediately moved closer to her. When Buster warns me of danger, he's not following his programming. He's making a choice to protect someone he loves. When I choose to risk everything to keep him safe, I'm not being irrational. I'm honoring a relationship that makes both of us more than we could ever be alone. The dog looked up at Sarah with absolute trust, his tail wagging slowly. In that simple gesture, the entire auditorium could see something that no amount of scientific analysis could capture: the indefinable essence of genuine connection. The hegemony believes they can improve the galaxy by optimizing our relationships, Sarah continued. But some things become worthless the moment you try to engineer them. Love that's programmed isn't love. Loyalty that's manufactured isn't loyalty. Partnership that's designed can never match the strength of bonds that grow naturally between beings who choose each other freely. Kethvar rose to offer a rebuttal, but his words were drowned out by something unprecedented in the chamber's history. The assembled companions, responding to some shared instinct, began vocalizing their support. Memory cats purred, empathy worms hummed, and Buster added his clear bark to the symphony of interspecies solidarity. The sound wasn't random or chaotic. Despite representing dozens of different evolutionary paths, the companions had somehow synchronized their responses into something that transcended species barriers. It was as if they were speaking with one voice, declaring their choice to remain with their bonded partners. The Galactic Council's emergency session convened immediately after the demonstration. Within hours, they had established the Companion Protection Accord, legally recognizing bonded relationships as fundamental rights that could not be violated for research purposes. Operation Archive was officially terminated, and the hegemony found themselves facing sanctions from species across the galaxy. Their cold logic had been defeated not by superior science, but by the simple truth that some relationships were too valuable to sacrifice for any amount of knowledge or efficiency. Sarah sat in her quarters aboard the Lucky Strike, scratching behind Buster's ears as she read reports of similar accords being signed throughout known space. The galaxy had learned a new rule that would guide interspecies relations for generations to come. Never hurt someone's companion, because the bonds of love and loyalty were stronger than any force that tried to break them. Buster yawned and settled against her leg, content in the knowledge that his human was safe and his place in the universe was secure. He had no understanding of the political revolution he'd helped trigger, but he knew the only thing that really mattered. They were together, and they would stay together no matter what challenges the galaxy might bring. The rule was simple, universal, and unbreakable. The galaxy had learned it the hard way, but they had learned it well. Never hurt a human's dog, because humans would move heaven and earth to protect what they loved. And in a galaxy full of wonders, that fierce devotion had proven to be the most powerful force of all the trading posts on Kepler. 442b buzzed with the usual mix of species conducting business across the Outer Rim territories. Zephyrian merchants haggled over crystal shipments, while Thackeray engineers examined fusion components with their 4-eye precision. The air recyclers worked overtime to accommodate the various atmospheric preferences, creating a symphony of hisses and hums that seasoned traders had learned to ignore. Captain Sarah Chun adjusted the leash attached to her companion, a golden retriever named Buster, who wagged his tail at every new scent and sound. The dog had been her constant companion for 3 years of deep space trading runs, ever since she'd rescued him from a derelict Earth transport. Most aliens found the relationship puzzling at best, incomprehensible at worst. "Why do humans insist on traveling with non-sentient creatures?" asked Vextar, a towering hegemony official whose chitinous plates gleamed under the station's artificial lighting. His mandibles clicked with obvious distaste as Buster sniffed curiously at his metallic boots. Such inefficiency. Sarah's jaw tightened, but She kept her voice level. Buster's not cargo, he's family. And he's smarter than half the beings on this station. The hegemony have been expanding their territory aggressively over the past decade, absorbing smaller civilizations under the banner of galactic efficiency. Their philosophy emphasized cold logic and resource optimization above all else. Emotional attachments were viewed as weakness, particularly among species they deemed primitive. Vextar's compound eyes fixed on the dog with scientific curiosity. Fascinating how lesser species form such irrational bonds. The Hegemony Council would find this specimen useful for behavioral studies. He's not a specimen, Sarah said firmly, her hand instinctively moving to rest on Buster's head. The dog looked up at her with trusting brown eyes, tail still wagging despite the tension in the air. The alien official made a note on his digital tablet, stylus clicking against the surface with mechanical precision. All cargo must be declared for taxation purposes, including biological entities. Buster isn't cargo either. He's a registered crew member with full documentation. This wasn't entirely true, but Sarah had learned to navigate bureaucratic loopholes during her years as an independent trader. Most civilizations had some provision for essential personnel, even if they didn't understand the human concept of pets. Vextar's mandibles spread in what might have been amusement. Crew member? This creature contributes nothing to ship operations. It consumes resources without providing value. Before Sarah could respond, Buster's ears perked up and he began whining softly. His sensitive nose had detected something the station's sensors had missed. Within seconds, emergency alarms began blaring throughout the facility. Hull breach in Section 7. Came the announcement over the comm system. All personnel evacuate immediately. The trading floor erupted into controlled chaos as various species hurried toward emergency exits. Sarah scooped up Buster and headed for a ship, but Vextar blocked her path. The creature detected the breach before our instruments, he observed, his tone shifting to something resembling scientific fascination. Remarkable sensory capabilities for such a primitive organism. That's what good dogs do, Sarah replied, pushing past him. They watch out for their pack. As she made her way through the crowd, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that Vextar's interest in Buster had taken a dangerous turn. The hegemony collected useful species for their archives, studying and cataloging them before deciding their ultimate fate. She'd heard rumors of entire civilizations being relocated for research purposes that lasted generations. Her ship, the Lucky Strike, sat in Docking Bay 12, its familiar bulk providing a sense of security in the chaos. Sarah ran through her pre-flight checklist with practiced efficiency while Buster settled into his custom safety harness. The dog had learned to enjoy the sensation of acceleration, often pressing his nose against the viewport to watch stars stretch into lines during jump preparation. As the Lucky Strike cleared the station's gravitational field, Sarah received an encrypted message on her personal comm. The sender was listed as unknown, but the content made her blood run cold. Captain Chun, your biological companion has caught the attention of certain parties within the hegemony hierarchy. We strongly advise caution in your future dealings. A concerned friend. Sarah deleted the message and pulled Buster closer, scratching behind his ears as she contemplated their options. The dog leaned against her leg, offering wordless comfort with the intuitive understanding that had made their bond so strong. Looks like we're in for some trouble, buddy, she murmured. Buster responded with a soft woof, his tail thumping against the deck plating. In his simple canine worldview, as long as Sarah was with him, everything would be all right. He had no way of knowing that powerful forces were already planning to test the strength of that bond. The ship's navigation computer chimed, indicating they'd reached the jump point for their next destination. Sarah hesitated over the controls, knowing that each hyperspace jump left a traceable signature. The hegemony had resources she could barely imagine, and if they truly wanted Buster for their research programs, running would only delay the inevitable confrontation. But she'd made a promise to protect him, just as he'd protected her countless times with his loyalty and instinctive warnings. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. The stars outside the viewport shimmered as the Lucky Strike prepared to jump, carrying its two-member crew toward an uncertain future where the galaxy was about to learn that some bonds couldn't be broken by force or logic.